I love this. I love it.
Looks like a couple people are joining.
Yeah. Mhm. I say we probably go ahead and get started, Sarah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. So welcome everyone. For those of you who are new, I'm Sarah Sora, the director of our Dyslexia Center and Learning Lab at the Carlo Campus School. And Teresa and I are so excited to welcome our guest today, but I'll let Teresa introduce herself quickly before I do that.
Okay, yes. So welcome to our February Parent Partnership Lunchtime Series. I'm Teresa Kalchek, for those of you that are new joining us. And I'm the director of the Center for Multisensory Learning here at Wheeling Country Day. And Sarah and I are getting really, really good at this. We're starting to we get excited each month to come together and feature someone or feature the things that we do at our learning centers. And today's super exciting because Sarah's been talking about this special guest for quite some time. And she finally said, I'm going to get him. I'm super, so she did, she definitely did. But I'm gonna let Sarah do the introductions and take it from here.
Great. Okay. Yes, I met Collin maybe a year ago now, and we have a common passion for reaching out to kiddos who need tutoring, who have learning disabilities. And Collin is doing that through his Learning Disabilities of Pittsburgh chapter of Learning Disabilities of America. And I'm doing it here at the Dyslexia Center, and Teresa is doing it at her multisensory center at Wheeling Country Day. So I'm really excited for everybody to hear from Collin, and I'm excited to hear from him also. So I'm going to read you a little bit about Collin. He has a PhD in molecular biology and microbiology from the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, a certificate in disability legal studies from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. He is a research scientist for the University of Pittsburgh, studying how HIV changes immunological responses to tuberculosis. Dr. Diedrich has multiple learning disabilities and personally understands how thinking differently can be a struggle and a gift. He is an advocate, an author, a professional speaker for students who have learning disabilities. He advocates the importance of finding, this is my favorite, finding your jetpack, your allies and techniques that you can use to overcome barriers in life. He is the founder and president of the Learning Disabilities Association of Pennsylvania and believes everyone has a talent and everyone has a gift. And he wants to help everybody, including your kiddos, find that gift. So with that, I welcome Collin Diedrich, Dr. Collin Diedrich.
Yeah. It's okay. It's no, it calls me doctor. It's all good. But thank you so much. That was really nice. So basically what I want to do here is sorry, I'm going to change a setting real quick. So basically what I want to do here is just give kind of walk you through my story of like how I became a scientist and some of the skills that I had to acquire over the years to actually like do well in school and actually pursue this dream of becoming a scientist. And then I want to talk about at the end a little bit about my nonprofit and some of the stuff that we're doing. Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, and I'll just like go through it. So essentially so just to give a little background about myself. So as Sarah mentioned, so I'm a research scientist, and I have a PhD in molecular virology and microbiology, and I look at the immunological interaction between HIV and tuberculosis. Essentially, I want to understand why is it that people that are infected with HIV, why are they so susceptible to tuberculosis, which is a bacteria that infects millions and millions of people each year, and there's probably 1 billion people that are infected with Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And so this is something that I've been working on in this area since 2007 when I joined my first lab. And so I've done multiple postdoctoral fellowships. The first one was in the University of Cape Town. And so I was there for about 3 years, and it was a wonderful experience, and also where I could see HIV and tuberculosis, that syndemic, or those two overlying epidemics, are the most prevalent in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Africa specifically. So it was an interesting experience being there for about 3 years. Moved back in about 2015 to the University of Pittsburgh. And started a second postdoc where I was continuing my research as well, and then transitioned into a research staff scientist, which is what I'm currently doing. I also have, as Sarah mentioned, a certificate in disability legal studies from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. And the reason I wanted to get that, or learn more about how laws protect us, because as I started advocating more regularly for people with learning disabilities, one of the things that I realized was the only reason I am where I am is because of the laws that protect people with disabilities. And so I think it was just important for me to get a better understanding of those laws and how they protect people like me. In addition to that, so a lot of like the work that I'm doing is really just like analytical and stuff, but I also am an improviser, and this also is incorporated into our nonprofit, where I started to improvise on a kids improv team, where it's like family friendly improv, and we were doing a lot of it through the first half of COVID, and we're like starting this up again, which is really nice. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is founding this nonprofit, the Learning Disabilities Association of Pennsylvania. We're the official state affiliate of the Learning Disabilities Association of America. And we're providing some specific services for people within our region, and I'll go through some of that as well. So one thing that I think is really important is to understand what do we think of when we think of intelligence. And so I want everyone to just like rhetorically, you're just think about like the people that you think are smart. And one of the things though that when I think about it a lot is I think, people that say, oh, well, you read a lot, you read a lot of books, so you must be really smart, or you just know a lot of facts. We always have those, we have those friends, family members, or acquaintances that don't need to look a lot of stuff up on Google. And then there's people like me that need to look up everything because it's hard to remember certain things. People that get good grades a lot of times, like that's just like what people think of when they think of, oh, you're smart, you got an ace, you must be smart. Or you're great at Jeopardy, being able to like quickly answer questions, like these Trivial Pursuit questions. The ability to explain things that are complex, or even just thinking fast in general. And I think a lot of times people equate like the desire to learn as a sign of intelligence. And so with all of that kind of like in our society right now, what happens when you don't have those things? Or what happens when you have one of them and you're missing out on a few of those? And so that's what really brought like my attention to learning disabilities, because as I was going through my life, one of the things that I noticed was like it was always hard for me to learn information. So we all know like the general fact that keeps getting repeated, that 1 in 5 of us have a learning or attention issue. And if you look at reading scores, of students with specific learning disabilities in 4th grade to 8th grade, you see that reading scores just overall are much lower, and they don't really improve as you get older. And so when you're reading at a below basic level, then that has, you know, downstream effects that can really just like affect like the rest of your life. And so that was me, and that currently is me. And so I was diagnosed on the DSM-4, so we're currently in DSM-5, but it was specifically an unspecified learning disorder and reading disorder. So essentially it was just like, it took me a while to learn new information. It takes me a long time to read. My reading proficiency is probably in the bottom 14, 15 percentile. My oral processing speed is also in the bottom like 15th percentile as well. So it's just like information was always just really difficult for me to process, and it took me a really long time. And so I always viewed words kind of as like words of prey, where they were just really negative, and I don't like words. It's always really I don't like reading, and so it was something that, you know, started really early on. Words would like come into my head, and they would like slowly disappear, and I would just be like, I know this word, but I'd forget it. Or I'd look at a word and I'd see it and have like a decoding issue where it's like, I see the word, I should know it, but I don't. And it's just like those gears are just like locked, you know, in my head. And so just to give you a basic idea of like how I process information, I want to give you just like kind of a basic sentence that to represent like how I process and decode information. And so if you look at this sentence, it is, today is a great day to run as a cake. And so this sentence doesn't really make much sense, but I guess this was about 5 years ago now. I ran a marathon, the Pittsburgh Marathon, dressed in a birthday cake because it was my wife's birthday. I have terrible executive functioning, and I forgot that it was her birthday on May 7th. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh, I need to dress as a cake. So this sentence hopefully makes sense now. But how do I process this? I like the sentence because it has two distinct ideas. So today is a great day, and a day to run as a cake. But here are just like a few 8 examples of how my brain processes this this sentence. And so one of the things that I'll do with my slower processing speed is I'll add in a randomly placed ellipsis. So the two distinct ideas become separated. And so I would read this as, or process this in my head as, today is a great day to run as a cake. And I may not know that today is actually a great day to run as a cake because it's two distinct ideas. Also, a lot of times when I'm reading, whether out loud or just in my head, I'll add in inappropriate pauses. And so that sentence in my head becomes, today is a great day to run as a cake. And then that becomes really hard to actually infer any meaning when you start having those randomly placed periods in a sentence. It becomes really difficult. The other things that I'll do is I'll just jump over random words, and this sentence could turn into, is a great day to as a cake. And I won't know that I'm talking about today, and I won't know that I'm talking about running. Sometimes I get the gist of it where I get rid of all those really small words, and it'll say, and I'll say in my head, today, great run cake. And I won't know that like I want to run as a cake. I won't know that the day itself is great. Also becoming the editor, you know, a lot of us do this as well. And there are times where I'll read a sentence and I'll just make whatever modifications that that I think fit. Because of my slow processing speed, one of the ways I've adapted to that is basically guessing. And so I am pretty good at guessing what people are going to say, or what a sentence is, what the meaning of a sentence is. However, it's not great. I'm pretty good, but I'm not great at it. And so then becoming the editor, sometimes I'm reading that sentence and it comes out as, today I'm going running with cake, which is a different meaning than the original sentence. Sometimes I smush the words together to create words that don't exist. Today is a great day to run as a cake. And I'm like, what is an as a cake? This doesn't make sense, you know, and I'm trying to figure this out while I'm reading this sentence. And then the thing that happens most of all is I'm spending so much mental energy reading every character, every letter, every word, every sentence. And then as I'm like reading longer things, every sentence, like a paragraph, page, chapter, book. And it's just so much mental exhaustion that I just end up randomly forgetting what the beginning of the sentence was, or what the beginning of the paragraph was, or what the beginning of the chapter was. And so then it becomes really, really hard to learn new information. And so this becomes, it's as if like words are highlighted by the CIA, where they have that like black highlighter and you can't really decipher what the meaning of a page is. Words can disappear. Even when I'm driving, I have a hard time even just like reading street signs and stuff. And it's like, I see the words, I know that they're there, and even places where I live, but like in my head, I have to read out every syllable, every sentence, or every word. And sometimes it just takes a really, really long time, and it can be incredibly frustrating. So when this happens to you, and when this happens to me, you grow up and you start feeling like, and you hear people say, well, you're stupid. And I would say, it's not stupid. I have these learning disabilities. I was fortunate to get diagnosed the first time in elementary school. And I would say, so I have a learning disability. And then you'd hear, well, learning disabilities aren't real. And I'll say, no, they are real. You need to work really hard. I was always fortunate because I like to learn. And I would spend hours and hours on homework assignments and reading and rereading lesson plans. And then people would say, oh, well, you're just being lazy. And I'm like, well, I'm spending 5 hours of time on homework that I think, you just spent an hour on. So I was like, that doesn't make sense. But I would be like, no, I just need to keep going. And then you hear people say, well, it's survival of the fittest. You shouldn't get accommodations, and I view accommodations as something as simple as like, you're wearing glasses, or you need, or just getting help to allow you to show the knowledge that you have. And so then it's like, well, I just need these accommodations. And then there's the peer pressure that we all deal with when we get an accommodation, where it's like not fair that Collin gets this extra time. And people say, are you slow? And they a lot of times they'll use the R word. And it can be really, really hurtful, and a lot of us have experienced this. And what all of this comes down to is it's just marginalizing like a group of people, and just basically saying it's like, you don't belong here, and that's really difficult. So when you hear all this externally, then what do you do? And what have I done, and like cycle through many times before, and you start internalizing what people say. So you start internalizing they said I'm stupid, so maybe I am stupid. I must be lazy if I'm not getting this. Maybe I don't deserve accommodations. Am I making this up? Are learning disabilities real? Or you start hating yourself. And so these were all just really difficult things that I've dealt with, over, multiple times, throughout my life, and stuff that I still struggle with today. And so when I think of like the path to LD success, and so this is however you define it, if you define it as, reading a book, or making money, getting good grades, or going into business, or doing well at a sport, or like winning a contest, or feeling good about yourself, whatever you do, one of the biggest issues is that we have this barrier in front of us when we have these learning disabilities, and it can make success seem impossible. And so how do we overcome this wall that's in front of us? And so one of the things that I think is really important is how do we get over those walls? And so those are the techniques and people in our lives that help us overcome them. And I like to think of them as jetpacks, basically because it's probably the most fun way to get over a wall. But in addition to that, I like to think of it because it's something that like you wear and then you're in control of as well. So you basically learn how to be your own jetpack and utilize those skills later on. And so this is something that I think is incredibly important. And these jetpacks also helped me become a better student and a scientist. And so what do I mean when I say a jetpack? Well, jetpacks have this interesting component. So one is your jetpacks can be your parents, teachers, anyone in your life that can like help you overcome or help you provide assistance to you. But the best jetpacks are also the ones that show you the help that they're giving you and teach you how to self-advocate. And so this is basically uh, like a circle of information that a child or a person can get, where someone acts as their jetpack and then they teach someone how to advocate for themselves. Because, as your parents or as your children, go to college, go to the workforce and stuff, you're not going to always be able to be in the room with them. But those skills and stuff that you teach them are ones that can always be with them. And so I think self-advocacy literally is the most important thing that we all have to learn. And so this is one thing that I've been I was really fortunate about to learn early on, that helped me overcome a lot of these negative emotions over my years. And so I just want to go through just a few different stages in my life. So in early education, I went to Belle Reed Elementary School. It was in St. Louis, Missouri. And basically, my parents were my first jetpacks. They were the people that noticed that I was struggling in school. And they were initially really hesitant about getting me diagnosed because they didn't want that label. They were really scared about that. They didn't want that to follow me. And so eventually, when they started talking to a counselor at school, that convinced them that it would be better for me if I had a diagnosis, because I could get those accommodations. My parents basically helped me. They allowed me to get diagnosed, which was wonderful. My mom would actually go to classes at the end of each year and like sit in on some of the classes and like find the strict teachers that were comfortable with kids, or that were good with kids with learning disabilities, and then talk to the principal about getting me those teachers when I was in elementary and middle school as well. And I remember being at my IEP meetings, and I didn't totally understand what was going on, but I knew that there were a lot of people around that were trying to make education easier for me, even if I didn't understand all of what they were doing. I also was incredibly fortunate where I saw a special education tutor from about first grade through 12th grade. We didn't do multisensory reading instruction or anything like that. I only learned about that 5 or 6 years ago when I started advocating more here in Pittsburgh. But the special education tutor, she taught me how to study. She basically helped show me that having thinking differently and having learning disability was okay, and it was really, really wonderful to the person that has been most instrumental in my life that isn't a family member is that special education tutor, Kathy. And in addition to this, one of the things I learned early on was there really isn't a fair balance, and this was something that was really difficult. I remember my mom talking to one of my teachers and saying, Collin is going home and he's studying for like 4 or 5 hours, and this is when I'm in elementary school, because I was obsessed with getting good or decent grades, but I was always studying. And I remember one of our teachers saying, if anyone's doing homework for my class for more than an hour or something, you need to put your pencil down and stop. And I remember in my head being like, oh my God, of course I'm studying more than an hour. And everyone else in the class was like, who would study for more than an hour for this class? And so it was just really interesting, where it's like I started to realize, I was like, it's really not fair that I have to study so much. But it was a lesson that I needed early on, because when you read slower, it's going to take you longer to read a book, and that's just how it is. So it made me learn how to balance my school a little differently than some of my peers. And so with my parents being my first advocate, they also helped show me that having a disability was okay. I also learned early on that I had jetpacks. I had these people in my life that were helping me, me overcome some of the negatives of having a learning disability. And I understood that help wasn't easy, that you had to ask for it. And sometimes you had to push incredibly hard for it as well. And so that gave me the first inclinations that it was important to start self-advocating, because I had a very involved parents one of the things that I needed to do was I had to learn like, okay, well then I'm kind of on my own in college and I need to utilize these skills. And I went to Bradley University because at the time, and I'm sure, now, they had a really good disability resource office, and they were incredibly supportive. And I remember meeting with them before I went to grad school or to college. But even having those initial meetings and getting accepted to Bradley and being, really excited about it, one of the things that happened though was, I was embarrassed about going to the disability resource office. I didn't want to go, and then eventually I remembered, something that my mom said. She was like, well, if you just get an accommodation, you get the letters to your professors, if you don't need the accommodation, you don't need to have it. Or you don't need to use it, but just like go and make sure that you have it. And I remember being like, God, I'm just embarrassed. I don't want people to see me because of that stigma associated with having learning disabilities. But I'm really thankful that I did. I went there and I was embarrassed, and then I got those letters and stuff, but I didn't want to bring them to my first class. And I waited till at the end of when my first professor, it was a biology 101 course, and he said at the very end, said when he was talking about his syllabus, he said, if any students are here, or are registered at the disability resource office, come talk to me, and I can help you with accommodations. And that simple line that was like nonchalant, oh yeah, if you're registered, just come talk to me. I was like, wait a minute, he's talking to me. And so then I was able to like go down and talk to him. I was embarrassed. I didn't bring the official letter from the disability resource office with me that day, because I was embarrassed by it. But I was able to explain my situation, and I was like, oh, I just forgot this. I need to go run back to my dorm room and get it. But it was one of those things where it's like, like now I'm comfortable talking about having learning disabilities, but that waxed and waned over time. And in college, I was extremely unbalanced. I was studying probably 12 14 hours a day. I wouldn't go out very much. I also ran cross country, so it was the Division I cross country team as well. I walked on the team, and I was the slowest person on the team, but I really liked it, and it was a wonderful experience. But it was like I got up and I did our early morning workouts and I studied. And that was pretty much it. And so those early inclinations, when I was in elementary school, knowing that I had to study more was really helpful. And I was also the student that would go to all my classes. I used a recorder at the time, so this is a digital recorder. This was in 2002, my freshman year. And so I had a digital recorder. I printed out all the PowerPoints that we had for the class. I wrote down the time on the PowerPoints where the teacher was talking. And then I would go back and re-listen to that and fill out the other side of the PowerPoint with more in-depth notes. And I would listen to them like almost right after every class. In addition to that, I read the book and highlighted whatever chapters I needed to. I typed up those notes, I highlighted those, and then I made cue cards of all of them. So I was studying 80, 90 hours for most of my like even smaller tests. And so I was, doing well. I was really working, incredibly hard, but that comes at a cost of not doing a lot of fun things. And one of the ways that I was able to like overcome that like temporary, obsession with work was, writing down my goals. And I wrote down academic goals. I wrote down the research that I wanted to do when my sophomore year, when I decided I wanted to be a research scientist. Running's always been really important to me. So goals that were beyond school, and health, and like seeing family and friends were all these things that I wrote down because I wanted to actually, if I had them written down, then they felt more tangible. And in addition to that, on that sheet of paper in my sophomore year, so in 2003, I wrote down, I was like, I want to be an HIV researcher and I want to study in sub-Saharan Africa, because I think it was important to like understand what the virus is doing in areas that are where HIV was and it is epidemic. And so all of that came from being able to self-advocate for myself. And that was something that has been incredibly important over my life. And so I think that it's really important when you're talking to your children or you're talking to students, self-advocacy is a huge spectrum. It's sitting closer in class if you know that you get distracted. and that's something that you don't really need, or you don't always need permission from your professor or from your teachers. So, it's sitting closer in class, all the way to, talking to your professor about receiving an accommodation. And then if you get pushback, following up with the disability resource office. So there's this huge spectrum of self-advocacy. But I think, I think what was so important for me is I started with, myself, and saying like, okay, well, I need to sit close. I had this digital recorder, and I remember, kids making fun of me for having a recorder, but it's something that I think was really, really important and instrumental in my daily life now as well. And in college, I also learned that knowledge was precious. It's something that it's something that was always really difficult for me, because it took me a long time to learn new things. And so whenever I gained more knowledge, I learned something new, I felt that it was really precious and important for me. And so that really drove my love of being a scientist. And so then as like I started, getting good grades and like getting through college, and then I started applying to grad school, I started like outwardly, saying like, I got a good grade, but I read terribly, and like I would always like joke about, it, because that was just the way of like my self-defense mechanism. And then I started to feel though, like almost constantly, imposter syndrome. So it was like, even when I would find success, I would always like look at myself and say like, well, I didn't really deserve that. I tricked someone into thinking that I was smart. I tricked this professor into giving me a good grade. I definitely didn't deserve it. And so that's something that like has come up, at most points of my life. And it was always really, really difficult, especially when I would find these successes. And so these like minor or even major successes started to become meaningless. Like if I got a good grade on a test, it was like, okay, so I got a good grade, but they're going to find out I'm stupid on the next one. Or applying to grad school, or doing all of these things, it was always, what have I done for myself lately? And so any minor success or any immediate success was followed by well, that's not really important. And so it made it really difficult, and especially in grad school. And so one of the things that I think is incredibly important that we also need to teach, our kids, is to get comfortable with failure. And so like I define failure more loosely, where, it can be anything from like failing to try something new, or like forgetting plans, but they're really large failures, in my life. And like when I was in my second year of grad school, so this would have been in 2007, we take a comprehensive exam, and that's where you write a thesis proposal of what you're supposed to do for the next 5 years, as a PhD student. And I failed that, and I had to retake it. And if I failed it a second time, I would have gotten kicked out of school. And so like all of these experiences, these huge failures to like these really small ones, with like forgetting plans or failing to try or having papers rejected or collaborations, in my life falling through, like a lot of that stuff really helped prepare me for these larger failures, in my life, where it's like, just because I did one thing poorly doesn't necessarily mean that that it's going to continue. And so I think that was one thing that was really, really important for me. And especially even taking a step back, when I was applying for grad school, I got rejected from every school I applied to except for Pitt. People would talk to me about that. They would say, oh, why'd you choose Pitt? And I would, wax on about, oh, they have a great HIV program. That was, what I exclusively wanted to work on when I first came here. But the truth of the matter was, I was like, well, in the back of my head, I was like, oh, they were the only ones that wanted me. They were the only ones that I could trick. And so that also led to more imposter syndrome. When I came to grad school, I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want to say that I had any learning disabilities. And the only reason that I did was I met the director of the molecular virology and microbiology program. And my conversation with her went really, really well. And she was like so friendly and nice to me. I was like, afterwards, at the end of that meeting, I was like, Joanne, so I have multiple learning disabilities, and I received accommodations, my whole life. And I was like, I don't know, am I allowed to get them at school here too? And her response was, oh, absolutely. Here's this number. And it was like, no big deal. And so like that no big deal mentality was one thing that was really helpful to me, because I never really wanted to put people out and make people feel like like they had to jump through a lot of hoops for me. So that nonchalant, like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's not a big deal. That's like, it made me feel a lot better. And so then that helped squash some of the imposter syndrome that I felt. But that imposter syndrome, that goes away and then comes back and goes away and comes back and stuff, as well. And so the other things that I really needed to do was like build trust in the jetpacks and the skills that I learned over my life. And sometimes when I would like look at my jetpacks, there'd be people that supported me, or skills that I learned. I wouldn't see the jetpack, I would see an anvil attached to me. And so I had to learn, it's like, no, I need to trust these people are helping me, these techniques are working. But it's also interesting because if you think about a technique that helps you do well in a specific class, or helps you do well, in a specific work experience, if I think about that as a glove, it's like, okay, so this baseball glove allows me to catch baseballs really well. And so when I was a graduate student, working with my PI, so that's the primary investigator, the person that's in charge of the lab, I would meet with her and I would say, and she would give me an incredible amount of time to like explain my data. I outlined every little thing that I talked about, because I didn't want to miss anything. And I thought it was really, really important that I thought it was really important, like how she always talked to me, and it was really wonderful. And I was like, wow, we have a really wonderful relationship. But one of the things that I noticed though was I utilized those techniques when I moved to Cape Town with my first postdoctoral fellow advisor. And what I realized is I had all these notes written out about what I wanted to talk to him about, and he would like look over from his desk, and he would like look down and see everything that I was writing and stuff. And it made me uncomfortable because, as you're talking to someone, if they can see your notes, if you're judging by the situation, if you wanted to like modify something that you're saying, or like skip over something, you don't have that option anymore. And so I was like, wait, this perfect technique that I had in one situation didn't work here. And this is also something that I learned early on when I would study for classes. Some classes I needed to make those cue cards. Some classes I needed to record every lesson and re-listen to them. Some classes I just needed to read the book or talk to people about it. And so we all have different techniques that help us learn. And so all of these skills that I've been talking about have really helped me become a better scientist. And one of the things though is that, like, as a scientist, you're working really hard, and so there isn't a great balance. We're in lab a lot and we don't make a lot of money doing this job, but you do it because you love it. And it's really important to like understand the topic that you're in addition, like we're in the middle of a pandemic and I'm an infectious disease scientist. And so it's like the balance is off, but it's something that I learned early on. I also learned early on that like thinking differently, approaching problems from a different view is really important in being a scientist. And one of the beautiful, wonderful things about science is that we have these amazing new students and these young people that are coming in and giving us like their new ideas and stuff. And it's really, really wonderful, like in this scientific space that also helped me learn when I was much younger. Also, knowledge is precious. It's really important, especially in today's society, to like understand what data means. And this is something that, I learned in college, and I was like, wow, this is really important. And it helped push me to become the scientist that I am today. Writing down these goals, it's really important to be goal oriented because it's really difficult to working on an experiment for 6 months, and then sometimes it doesn't work, or you're spending all of this time doing this. But one of the things that makes it better is like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and the long-term goal is I'll get this paper out, or I'll get this higher up position, or and it allows you to like deal with some of these like harder imbalanced times early on. And then self-advocacy, we always need to ask for help. Science is never done in a vacuum anymore, which is a wonderful thing. You have experts in all these little different areas, and you have to ask for help, because if you don't ask for help, you're not going to get it. And that's something that I had to do early on, and I was doing like almost my entire life. And so it's become very easy for me to ask for help, getting comfortable with failure. We as scientists, experiments don't work until they work, right? And there's constant like, oh, this didn't work, I need to make a modification. Oh, it didn't work, I need to make an adjustment. Oh, I think it worked. Oh no, I learned, you know, something new, and it didn't work. Then when it works, you do the experiment a handful of times, you work out all the kinks of it, but then you're done with it. Then you move on to the next thing. So you're dealing with failure constantly. And then also adjusting techniques when you're when I'm in a lab with tuberculosis. It's an aerosolized pathogen, so it which means that, you know, it's in the air, you know, similar to SARS-CoV-2, so the virus that causes COVID. And you know, we're in this like really, you know, negative pressure environment, and so it can be it requires a different set of skills than when we're working, you know, on a bench top, you know, outside of those areas. So you have to like adjust these techniques, but these were all things that I learned early on. And so I think that a lot of times we think, you know, are these worlds, or are these ideas in conflict, intelligence and being unintelligent? Well, a big part of me is like, you know, reading is hard. You know, I'm probably still reading in the bottom, you know, 15th percentile, but I also, you know, I have a PhD and I have successes, and, you know, I've been able to, you know, work, you know, in sub-Saharan Africa for 3 years. I was able to get that certificate in disability legal studies, and, you know, which was about 5 classes at the School of Law. And, you know, there's all of these things. And so it's like, there's this, you know, contradiction I think a lot of people feel. But I think that it's important to say, you know, it's okay to not be good at everything, that you can focus on the things that you are good at while getting help for the things that are difficult. So, you know, I have a hard time with writing grants, you know, and reading and writing scientific papers. So it takes me a little longer. So I have to use, you know, assistive technology. I have to get help. I have to talk to people about it a lot, learning these new scientific techniques. Remember, my processing ability is definitely slower. So I have to write everything down, and I have to really focus on learning these new techniques, when a lot of my peers, you know, they'll see it like 1 or 2 times and they're like, okay, I got it. And so it's just something that, you know, I've learned over the years. And also from presentations, you know, it can be hard learning as well, and remembering basic facts. I'll have to go back and just say, oh yeah, what are some of these basic facts, or these basic findings that that I found in some of my like previous papers, and I just have to like jog my memory a lot of times. So those are some of the negatives, but I think one of the really important things is like thinking differently also allows you to have you know, its benefits. And so like redefining an area of my research is, you know, a really small niche of how HIV changes this like immunological complex to tuberculosis. But it's been really interesting thinking differently and being able to approach some of these problems in new ways. And so I don't overlook, you know, things that are unexpected. And I have this kind of obsession over my work as well, which is also really, really important when it's not abusive or not hurtful. So now it's like, you know, I have this tunnel vision. I'm able to work incredibly hard. But also, I think that all of these pros really do outweigh a lot of these cons as well. And here's just a few of my publications. So one of the things that I think is really important as I wrap this up, if you asked me, or if you ask your children, you know, do you like your brain? You know, when I was in elementary school, I would have said absolutely not. You know, I'm stupid. I have a brother, an older brother, and a twin sister, and you know, they're really, really smart. And I was like, things are always so easy for them. If you asked me when I was in, you know, Bradley, when I was at undergrad, you know, do you like your brain? I probably would have said absolutely not. I'm sitting here, you know, studying 12 hours a day, you know, just trying to get decent grades. You know, I'm getting rejected from grad school. You know, I'm stupid. You know, I don't deserve to be here. Then I happen to get to grad school, and I start saying, you know, I don't deserve to be here. I failed my comprehensive exam. And it wasn't until the end of grad school, and when I started my postdoc at the University of Cape Town, where I started to think that my learning disabilities really helped me become a better scientist. And so I think it's really important for all of us to redefine intelligence. And so it's like, I do feel successful, but I still need all of the jetpacks, the people, and the things in my life that help me overcome some of these negatives. And so now I just want to just give some basics of some of the of what we're doing at LDA of PA for the last like few minutes of this presentation. And so we are an official 501c3 nonprofit, and we are focusing on three main areas. We have a STEM outreach program, which I'll show some examples of in a second, where we try to create increased neurodiversity in STEM. We have a comedy empowerment committee where we actually teach improv comedy to children and help them, and the skills that you learn as an improv comedian, like getting up on stage, getting in front of people, making things up, getting comfortable with failure, a lot of those like overlap with like the skills that you need to like overcome some of the negatives associated with learning disabilities. So this has been really wonderful for us. And then our biggest thing that we're focusing on now is we have a multisensory reading instruction program that's exclusively for low income and underserved students, and we aren't charging anything for them. So they're actually able to these students are the students that qualify are receiving totally free support from us, and this is all grant funded work, which is really wonderful for us, but also increases the risk of it. But these are like the three main things we do. We also do some like advocacy and education work. We have presentations and stuff like this as well. So one of the STEM outreach things that we do that I think is really fun is we take these like complex procedures and we make them into multisensory videos. I don't think you're going to be able to hear. Can you hear this? I don't know if you can. But essentially what this is showing you is, I'm going to turn this down, is we take these complex experiments that are just in a PDF, and we put the words on the side of the screen. We have a scientist or a student, you know, in your science or engineering class that's actually doing the experiments and showing you exactly how to run every step of the experiment. And we designed these programs basically to make science more accessible to everyone. And so now we're working with the Pitt Biology Department, and we've applied for a handful of grants to help expand this type of learning instruction outside of the sciences as well. So this is something that like we're really excited about and we're learning. And then we also put on some science shows, like inclusive science shows, and we're working to actually develop a disability in STEM conference as well. And so we're in early talks with the Science Center here in Pittsburgh. We're hoping that we're going to be able to get a disability in STEM conference up and running by early to mid 2023. So we're really excited about that. And so then one of the things that I think is really important is that when I was restarting this state affiliate, and I think it's important to like admit your failures or your mistakes. And I did a lot of this initially on my own. And when I first applied to start this affiliate, I wrote that the name of our organization was Learning Disability Association of Pennsylvania Incorporated. And then I got a letter from the national branch, and they're like, well, technically our name is the Learning Disabilities Association of Pennsylvania, and get rid of this ink. And I was like, oh, okay, so I read that wrong. And so I refilled this out, and I was like, okay, I got this. And I paid the $70 fee. And $70 fee to do a name change. And I was like, all right, Learning Disabilities Association of Pennsylvania. But I realized in this second change here, this is association. So I spelled that wrong as well. And so I had to go in for a final change to actually get the correct organization that I was starting. And this, I realized this like after months and stuff. So I think it's really important to like understand that, you know, we can try these new things. We don't have to be perfect, and we can make mistakes and kind of owning our mistakes. And like, I like laughing at myself. So one of my mottos is over these last 3 years, as we built out these individual programs through our nonprofit, is I constantly say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it well. And I started saying that when I first started advocating for people and first started working in networking to start this organization, and we were trying to figure out what we were doing. And I remember like running from one meeting to another, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I was like, but I'm doing it well. And so I started saying, so that's been kind of my motto for the last, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, as well. So the last thing that I think is really important. So you all can be jetpacks. So how does a person help your children understand, how do they define success? Parents, are you always going to be there for your children? And of course you will, but sometimes you're not going to physically be there, so they have to learn some of those techniques, while they're in a classroom. Like, how can they ask for help? How can they get it? Educators, are you thinking how students will succeed when they're outside of class? Because sometimes, I'll meet these teachers and professors, and they'll say, oh, I'm really supportive of students with learning disabilities, and they're like, and they'll explain to me in more words how they are lowering the bar for them. And my response always is like, keep the bar where it is, but give them accommodation so they can so they can reach that level. Don't just give them an A because that they're working hard. And so I think it's really important for us to get those accommodations. And I think as educators, it's important to teach that as well. And so then we need to teach, and I say force here, we need to force and in a positive way, our children to learn how to advocate for themselves, to speak up for themselves. And there's no shame in asking for help. So we need to find out what help you need, which can be difficult. Find out who your jetpacks are. Slowly learn how to self-advocate. Learn the LD balance is always a little different, and you may need to work harder, and that's not fair, but that is okay. Get comfortable with failure. Write down your goals, and these students and your children, they really just need to be themselves, because life is a series of walls along a path, but the jetpacks really are greater than walls. And so then here is my information. If you wanted to go to I have a personal website. You can go to LDPhD. And I've started this before I got into my nonprofit. So like now all my time is focused on LDA of PA. So you can just go to this website and see some of the work that we're doing, or send me an email or check out our Facebook page. We're not super active on Facebook. And then if you're willing and able, we always love when people can support us, so we can continue our goals of helping low income students as well. So thank you so much for letting me give this talk. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Oh,
So,
Collin. Oh, go ahead, Teresa. Go.
Oh, no, go ahead. This is truly inspiring, Collin. And my first comment, I mean, you use, the language that you use is just, I kept taking notes and just walking away with just, jetpack and those of us in education and those parents, grandparents that are watching, and how we're going to share this out, of course, they need to hear that as well. We creating those, helping them with those jetpacks. And the one thing that jumped out to me was, when it comes to executive skills, you were outlining when you said, thinking differently, goal oriented, self advocating, adjusting your techniques to fit like where you're at and what you are learning, and overall being fearless. And that's what we say a lot around here is fearless learning. And that's what I hear in you. And we've had Dr. Peg Dawson on here teaching us what executive skills really are. And you actually are that application piece. You are, you have taught us today in just this short period of time, how you, over these years, you became flexible in your thinking. You are open to different perspectives. Your goal setting, your prioritizing, it was it seems like it was within you, and through the teaching of your parents. But these are skills that we know that a lot of kids that have learning differences, we have to directly teach them. These are skills that we really value ourselves on. We need to teach these kids how to self-advocate. And because sometimes we assume they just know how to self-advocate.
Right.
And they don't, but we as parents and educators have to to teach this so that like you can fulfill your passions and your dreams. So like,
Yeah.
honestly, kudos to you
Thank
for
you.
being very driven, but applying what we need to be teaching to these kids and encouraging them. I just cannot believe what
Thank
I
you.
was just writing down
I
everything
know.
you're saying.
I know. And I think, Colin, the thing
Yeah.
that really stuck out to me on the self-advocacy piece, because I do try to talk to my students, especially my middle schoolers, about, really trying that. And one of the things you said, that self-advocacy doesn't have to be going to the teacher and saying, and even talking about it, just when you said sitting closer, because
Yeah.
that's what helps you. Like that is self-advocating that is advocating for yourself. And that really struck a chord with me, because so much, I think, around that piece is the kids' fear of having to talk to their teacher or
Yeah.
write an email. And, talking and writing can be what
Oh
they
yeah.
struggle with. So
Yeah.
those silent things you're talking about, using the assistive technology, like those kinds of things are advocating for.
It's so important. And may I ask you one question?
Of course.
You're a twin. You said you're a twin.
Yeah.
Am I correct? So,
Yeah.
and your sister, she didn't have some of
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
different.
she doesn't have any. Yeah, so she doesn't have any learning disabilities.
Can you give a little bit of advice? Because, I see that with the twins and the one that has the disability. And what advice would you have for a parent when it comes to that child that is getting frustrated because my twin gets it so easily, and but my
Yeah.
I
No,
don't know.
it's a great question. And something that like I dealt with, like my dad tells a story when I was in, I think like first, second, or third grade. I was really little. We were like raking. I was like helping him rake leaves. Um, and I remember like looking up to him, or he tells the story. I don't remember it, but he was like, I looked up at him and said, like, oh, Carrie and Justin, my brother and sister, are my brother is really smart, and my sister, is like wonderful at art. She's just this amazing artist. And he was like, well, what are you good at? Or I was like, well, what am I good at? And what my dad told me, which was just like spot on, was he said that he like paused for a second. He was like, well, you're good with people. You understand people. And essentially what he was trying to like, what he was saying before I like understood what it was, he was like describing empathy and just like being able to like get along with people. And so one of the things that, and the way that he tells the story out, he was like, okay. And I was like, okay. And then I go back to breaking leaves.
Yeah.
But I think what was really important, like with that, is that like he was able to, or as like a parent, you're finding the things that both, all kids, they're good at certain things, or they like certain things, and it's like finding those things, and making sure that like, or trying to, which is might be easier said than done, that there isn't like, you're not competing with each other.
Right.
The success of your sibling is should be a success, like like for it's like should be good for everyone. But I know that a lot of siblings fight. So one of the things though that was really fortunate for me is my brother was always like he's 2 years older and just always really academic, and always wanted to be a clinician. And so I was always like really into sports, and like like individual sports like running and swimming and wrestling and those things. And my sister was always really into her art. And so we all had these different interests, so there wasn't as much like overlap and competition and stuff. But I think it's like really finding those things, and like talking to your kids realistically and kindly. Because one of the things that would come up is I say I'm bad at reading now, but I'm comfortable saying that. But I wouldn't use that language if I was talking to a child. But I say I'm bad at reading because, or because I remember people in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 12th grade telling me, oh, you're not bad at reading, you just read differently. And I'm like, well, but I'm not understanding what I'm reading. Like, that's bad. And that always rubbed me the wrong way in my head, where I was like, oh, it's okay to be bad at reading because I had these other things. And so I think, like, with my dad, he wasn't like, oh, Collin, well, you're just really good at school, or, oh, he didn't like lie to me. He was like, oh yeah, you're good at empathy, and he explained empathy, how you explain it to a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade or whatever. But I think those things are helpful,
Important.
when you have siblings that like aren't struggling, and some, that are.
Right. No, I appreciate that. We, Sarah and I in our learning centers, we meet all kinds of learners. And so I think one thing we're going to walk away with today is, how we can fuel their jetpack.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've been so inspiring, and
Yes.
I'm really, really thankful. And hopefully we can maybe get you again sometime. Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
great.
I mean, I'd love to, and I do appreciate, like, I love giving these presentations and stuff, and I do think it's really important. Like, it's just ending on, like, all of this was learned. Like, I didn't, like, sure, like, some of us have like inherent abilities or whatever, but like, I started this neurodiversity and STEM committee for my nonprofit because science didn't come naturally to me. I just liked learning, and I was like, oh, there's a job where you can add knowledge to the world.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, that's what I want to do. And like, all of these skills, like self-advocacy, being comfortable with failure, all of these things, and I like what you're saying, like this fearless learning. But like, you can say fearless learning, but like, inside you be scared.
Yeah.
And
scared.
and it
Yeah,
is,
right.
you can have fearless learning and be scared. But no, it's like, I was scared whenever I talked to a professor. I would be like, okay, I'm really nervous, but it's going to be okay. And it's like, wait, no, I'm fearless. And sometimes you just have to psych yourself up.
Right.
And,
Right.
And it's things like that, which I think are really important. So I like it. It's like, I have this fearless learning. Okay, but I'm also scared. Like, that's okay. It's okay but that's okay, because it's like, we all have this imposter syndrome at different times. We all question our abilities. But it's learning those skills to move on. So I really do like that, like, fearless learning. It's like, I am like, it's like I'm fearless. And then I'm the little boy in my stomach being like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, I'm walking towards that goal, and I'm going to do this,
Right. It's
and stuff.
true.
So it's cool. I think that's really great.
Yeah, so it's a term that we use quite a bit, here. And you, guess what? You've defined it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I want to say thank you. I knew what it meant. I know what it means, but after today, I really know what it means. So thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah, thank you for getting this wonderful friend to our community.
You're welcome. Collin, thank you so much for agreeing to come and speak with us today. It really was inspiring.
Yes.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our visitors, and come back next month. We'll be featuring Dr. Carol Ute from the Total Learning Center. And she's going to talk to us about, the clinical piece, clinical evaluation. So join us next month. All right. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you, Collin.
Thanks, Collin.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Bye.
Take care. Sarah.
I think it's
good.
Looks still recording. Is that still recording?
I think it is. I'm going to tell him. Collin, thank you. I cannot even begin to say thank you enough. I would love to meet you in person sometime.
Yeah, let's when the world is back to normal-ish.
We need to bring some kids. Your way.
Well, we're Collin and I were talking about these improv groups that we might be doing on Saturdays.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, here at campus school. So if you want to take a little field trip down with some of your kiddo, like invite some of your families for a Saturday.
Oh, give me some more information on that.
We're going to talk more about it, and then
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it and figure out all the details and stuff. But yeah, it should be pretty good.
That'll be fantastic. Okay, yes, include us, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was great. I'm excited to now I have these presentations on my radar too, so it'll be nice to see them and
Yeah.
Yeah, and yours,
as
this
well.
will be a recording and it'll go on both of our sites.
Yeah, that's